And testing 1, 2, 3. Am I there? Can you hear me now? Testing 1, 2, 3, ladies and gentlemen. All right, that was a fun start. This stream started the way Gregg Berhalter regime has been for 5 years. All right, we have to, adapt and acclimate to the way that a Berhalter roster goes. If incompetence is the hallmark of U.S. soccer, then we must bring a little bit of that into a YouTube channel that covers U.S. soccer. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The U.S. men's national team roster for Copa America has dropped. It is not the final roster. It has 27 guys on it. One of them is going to have to get cut. It's the laptop mic now. My God. All right. Now it's for sure the mic. Is the audio gone now? Sorry, guys. That was for Shaq Moore, Sean Johnson, and Tim Tillman, ladies and gentlemen. That's what that was for. So hopefully now this time we have a proper working mic. Hopefully we have a Christian Pulisic, Gio Reyna mic and not a Shaq Moore mic or Sean Johnson mic. You guys let me know if that's better. Sorry for the sort of, it's not my usual setup. I'm in Cancun shooting a movie. I just wrapped yesterday. I'm actually doing the stream, and then I go straight to the airport to hop on a plane to get back to Los Angeles. Okay. So I apologize. It's not the best lighting, and as we have learned, also not the best sound, but it's sort of the best I can do in the circumstances that I am in. Okay. So, guys, oh my God, what? Gregg Berhalter is always going to Gregg Berhalter so long as he is alive and kicking. See what I did there? And it's like every time you think, people will say, look, this roster is mostly good. No, this roster is mostly duh. This roster picks itself. Gregg doesn't get credit for picking Christian Pulisic and Gio Reyna and Chris Richards and Johnny Cardoso. Those are like an idiot could pick those guys. You don't get credit for that. What's crazy is the other guys, a few other guys who shouldn't be there. Now, remember, one guy's going to get cut, but let's get into the roster. Now, I know usually when Tack does this, he just shows the roster. I'm going to do it the Pete way, where we go position by position and break it down. All right, let's start with goalkeepers. No, this is the wrong. Oh, my God, you guys. This is what happens when Pete goes to Cancun. This is what happens when Pete goes to Cancun. That was the wrong one. And give me a second. I'm going to put the right one up here. That ain't it. That ain't it. That's the one. Don't worry. That was psych. That was not it, guys. That was not it. I said calendar and Celentano are both going. No, I literally am working. I have not. We've been pulling 15-hour days here for the last week, 15 to 16-hour days. I've slept very little, if at all. And so I'm sorry. If this roster stream is a little off the wall, it probably will be. I apologize in advance. But again, if 90% is good and 10% is shit, then it's a Gregg Berhalter roster. So here is the proper roster, ladies and gentlemen. Goalkeepers: Matt Turner, Ethan Horvath, and Sean Johnson. So Matt Turner obviously expected to start. Ethan Horvath expected to be the number 2. The big question was always who was going to be the number 3. And I think most of us thought it was going to be Drake Callender, or potentially what it should have been was one of the 3 Olympic age goalkeepers that ain't going to the Olympics, because the Olympics can only take 2. So if you're taking, Gaga Slonina and Patrick Schulte, then bring Chris Brady as the 3rd goalkeeper on this roster, et cetera, et cetera. But yet, Sean Johnson is the 3rd goalkeeper on this roster. And there are people who will say, the 3rd goalkeeper doesn't really matter. And in a sense, that's true. But it doesn't matter until it matters. Okay, it's very rare for both 2 goalkeepers to get injured, but it does happen. Okay, or one gets injured and one gets a red card. It does happen. So you can never treat it. Otherwise, just bring your toddler as the 3rd goalkeeper. Like, if you're saying there is no possibility they're going to play, then what's the fucking point of even bringing them, right? Just bring some clown. bring a motivational speaker, right? But if you say, well, there's always a chance they could play, then you should bring the best possible option, which is not Sean Johnson, okay? B, it's like you should have to earn your way onto a national team roster. Now, Sean Johnson was in that World Cup roster and it was a little less egregious because there wasn't as many options back then. But now we actually have young, talented, up-and-coming goalkeepers, but we ignore them in order to get some old clown who was never USMNT quality onto the roster. Hence the too many caps moniker for Shawnee Johnson. Hopefully he will not have to play. All right. Fullbacks time. 3 out of 4 are what we expected. Joseph Scally, Anthony Robinson, Christopher Lund. And ladies and gentlemen, the worst performer during the World Cup, the gentleman who didn't even look like a professional player when he got on the field in Qatar, is back. He's back for yet another tournament. Gregg Berhalter loves to shack it up with Mr. Moore because Shaquille Moore of Nashville SC, despite being injured for the last many, many months and only recently returning just in time to make a 27-man roster. Man, how good must it feel to be Shaq Moore? Your national team career is not based on skill, ability, or value brought to the team. Is based on some weird liking that Greg has. Do you guys remember when he got into that World Cup game? I think it was against Iran. And he was completely alone near the touchline, and a long ball was played to him. There was not a soul around him. Not a soul. Ball comes to him. He takes a touch. The ball bounces up in the air and goes out of the stadium. This guy didn't even look like a professional player, and yet he got more minutes than Joseph Scally in the World Cup. May I remind you, ladies and gentlemen. And so anybody who says, well, Shaquille Moore, and you'll probably see this from the media, right? There will be some media members, getting upset about the 26-man. This is my favorite one. They did this all of last cycle, remember? Players 20 through 25 on the roster don't really matter because I want to make sure I get access with Michael Cameron. It does matter. It does matter because they might have to play. And again, your spot on the national team should be earned. You don't just hand it out to anybody because it, quote, doesn't matter, right? And not only is it not true that they won't play, they might play over Joe Scally, who, has been a Bundesliga starter for the last 3 years. Because that's what happened during the World Cup. Well, Pete, who else would you have brought? Serginho Dest being injured. I'll tell you, you don't need to bring another right back. We have about 5 other guys who can play right back. Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, Tim Weah, Tyler Adams, Chris Richards. Bam. 5 guys that can play right back. Plus Joe Scally. 6. 6 guys. You don't need to bring another one. If you really absolutely have to bring one, and you don't want to bring our 3rd best right back, who is Brian Reynolds, because he's going to the Olympics, fine. You know who's better than Shaquille Moore? DeAndre Yedlin. I don't love Yedlin either, but he's better than Moore. Brooks Lennon of Atlanta United, better than Moore. That's 2. Marlon Fossey, right? Of, I think, it's not Charleroi. It's Standard Liège in Belgium. Also better than Shaquille Moore. Dewan Jones, also better than Shaquille Moore. So that's 4 guys right there that are better than Shaquille Moore if you actually want to bring a proper right back. And yet, Greg must bring Shaquille Moore. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hope he doesn't see the field, because otherwise we'll be witnessing yet another Shaquille Moore disaster class. Center backs is about what we have expected, right? Mark McKenzie, Tim Ream, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Chris Richards, and another one of Greg's lovers, Miles Robinson. Now, a lot of people actually think Miles Robinson should be there. I disagree. I would have brought Austin Trusty over both Mark McKenzie and Miles Robinson. But, this is far from the most egregious, center back calling. The best 3 are there, right? Tim Ream, Chris Richards, and Cameron Carter-Vickers. And, the question is who's going to start, who's going to play. Hopefully it's not Miles Robinson, but there's a good chance that Greg starts Miles Robinson. And people will say, well, Pete, Austin Trusty's been getting, destroyed in the Premier League. That is true. So Miles Robinson would also get destroyed in the Premier League. Mark McKenzie would get destroyed in the Premier League as well. So if you're using that, remember, he was player of the season in the Championship, which is maybe not a top 5 league in the world, but it's not a bad league either. It's significantly better than MLS. Miles Robinson wasn't even good in MLS last year, right? And even if he's good in MLS now, there is a big difference between good in MLS and good in the Championship. Now, look, it's not the thing I hate the most having Miles Robinson there, but Trusty being continually snubbed when he's also a left-footed center back is just, I don't understand it. I don't understand it, okay? But as far as who should start in Copa America, I would still start Chris Richards and Tim Ream if we're going back 2. If we're going back 3, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Tim Ream, and Chris Richards, okay? So that's our center backs. Again, we'll see what Gregg does. Miles, I will reiterate, because I have a feeling that this might happen, Miles Robinson should not be a starter in Copa America. It's already questionable that he's on the roster. He shouldn't start. Let's get into midfield now. We brought 8 midfielders, ladies and gentlemen. 8. 8 midfielders. Malik Tillman, Johnny Cardoso, Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, Gio Reyna, Tyler Adams, and Luca De La Torre. And very bizarrely, Tim Tillman, who hasn't been in any rosters recently, except Cupcake roster, which we all know is not a real roster. It's just an MLS exhibition game. Why is he there is the question. I think, if we're being honest, very likely, if, it's a 27-man roster, one of them is going to have to be cut by June 12th, very likely it's going to be Tim Tillman. It should be Shaquille Moore, honestly. But very likely it's going to be Tim Tillman. But you never know. It could be Tyler Adams or Josh Sargent or Luca De La Torre. Nothing would surprise me with Gregg these days. Absolutely nothing would surprise me with Gregg. We already have 2 10s. That's what I don't understand. Okay? You have Gio Reyna. You have Malik Tillman. If, God forbid, both of them get injured over the course of Copa America, Christian Pulisic can play the 10. Heck, in a pinch, Weston McKennie can play the 10. Luca De La Torre can play the 10. Tim Tillman, he's just occupying space. Like, what is the point of having Tim Tillman there? Right? Like, I don't understand. Let's also be honest, Tyler Adams' health and fitness is a real question mark going into this game. Right? Yes, Tyler Adams is 25. That's your mistake, your roster mistake for you, the one that we need. With Tyler Adams' health being a question mark and Johnny Cardoso being the only fit 6 that we have, yes, I know Yunus Musa can play the 6. Even Luca De La Torre can play the 6. But with Tyler Adams' health and fitness being a real question mark, don't you guys think it would have been better to bring Leonard Maloney instead of Tim Tillman? Because not only can Leonard Maloney be a backup to Johnny at the 6, but also he can play center back in a pinch. And he's a left footer as well, which right now we only have one left-footed center back on the team, and that's Tim Ream. And Tim Ream hasn't played much for the last 4 or 5 months. It just seems like a very, very bizarre pick to bring Tim Tillman over Leonard Maloney. First of all, the levels are different, right? Leonard Maloney's been a solid Bundesliga player. And don't get me wrong, Tim Tillman's been good. He's had a good start to life in MLS. But as we've learned many, many times over, being good in MLS doesn't necessarily translate to the national team. And just positionally, it doesn't make any sense. We have plenty of guys that can play the 10, and we're thin at the 6. So yeah, let's ignore Leonard Maloney to bring another MLS guy onto the field. Gallardo says, I'm scared with these fullbacks. We need to play a back 3, but Triple G won't do it. Correct. If there's anything we have learned about Gregg Berhalter over the last 5 years, the reign of terror, it's that he doesn't experiment. He doesn't try things. He doesn't adapt. So expect 4-3-3. Now, we do have 2 games, all right, against Brazil and Colombia on the 8th of June and the 12th of June. By the 12th, by that Brazil game, one of these guys is going to have to go home. And this roster can still change, okay? If one of these guys gets injured, somebody else could come in. I think there's a chance that, what is today, the 20th of May? We're talking about 11 days left in May plus 12. So we're talking about almost a full month of time. Things can change. Let's see. But I doubt things will change for any other reason than injury, right? Like, let's say, Shaquille Moore stinks up the joint. He's not going home. That's a Gregg boy. Right? So we'll see. We'll see what happens with this roster between now and then. But with the midfielders, Tim Tillman's the one I don't understand. All right. Wide forwards. This is probably the one that makes the most sense so far. Christian Pulisic, Timothy Weah, Haji Wright, and Brendan Aronson. Yeah, look, I think the only question mark that some people might have about this one is Brendan Aronson. And I understand, he hasn't had a good season for Union Berlin, and I understand that. My question to those people is, if you're going to yank Brendan Aronson, who do you replace him with, right? And this is the conversation that we have. And oftentimes that conversation then goes like this. I would take Taylor Booth or Kevin Paredes or, Alejandro Zendejas, right? And my response is Taylor Booth and Kevin Paredes. Taylor Booth hasn't exactly been lighting it up in the Netherlands, let's be honest, okay, which is worse in the Bundesliga. Kevin Paredes has, been improving slowly and steadily in the Bundesliga, and that's good to see. But is he going to really contribute in Copa America? Probably not. He's probably best served being a locked-in starter at the Olympics. Zendejas, guys, anybody who watched that Gold Cup last year, let's be honest, Zendejas ain't it. And sure, he's having a great year in Liga MX, and that's fantastic. But, I mean, look, if Gregg had brought Zendejas over Brendan Aronson, I probably wouldn't have cared too much. But I think Brendan Aronson still has value as a defensive substitute. When you're defending a lead in the last few minutes of the game, he's going to come on. He's going to, chase and harass and harry and do Brendan Aronson things. And let's not forget the last month or so in the Bundesliga, he has showed an interesting spark, So after this Copa America, I do think Brendan Aronson is going to face significant competition from the likes of, Paredes and Taylor Booth and maybe one or two others, maybe a Griffin Yao if he steps up at some point. I don't personally think he's all that, but, the lack of options means that I'm fine with Brendan Aronson being on this roster so long as he's used correctly. And when I say used correctly, I mean used as a defensive substitute, right? Fumar Mota says Sabi is in good form in League One. Yeah, that's a shout. It's a shout. Well, good form is, he's scored a few penalties and has had one or two nice goals. Essentially done a lot of the same things that Brendan Aronson has done in Germany. So I don't know if the gap is really that big. I'm not Brendan Aronson's biggest fan. You guys know this. But I also, with a 26-man roster, I don't really have a problem with him being the fourth winger. And then last but not least is the forwards. And it's Folarin Balogun, Ricardo Pepi, and Josh Sargent. This is great. This is fine. I mean, the only real speculation was, is Ricardo Pepi not going to go? Because is he going to go to the Olympics instead? And, one of these guys still may not go. We don't know the status of Josh Sargent's injury. He's had this ankle injury that's been plaguing him since the last camp. And they've, David Wagner, before he was sacked by Norwich, essentially admitted that, we've sort of been managing that injury, right? And so perhaps they bring him into camp to see how bad the injury is. And it's very possible that Josh Sargent could be the guy sent home. Or it's very possible that Ricardo Pepi could be sent home on account of, they want him to play at the Olympics instead, and PSV Eindhoven won't let him play in both. Personally, I think it's very possible that Ricardo Pepi can play in both because it's not like PSV's using him so badly. So why not let him play in both? Hopefully, the guy that they cut is, hopefully it's Shaq Moore, but either Shaq Moore or Tim Tillman should be the guy they cut. Neither of them should be there. Neither of them have a spot. But Sargent's been unlucky, man. He seems to play well for club, and then just about time for the national team, he tends to get injured, and that's why he hasn't really had a look until Qatar. Since Qatar, I'm sorry. And we'll see. We'll see how bad the ankle injury is. We'll see who ends up getting left off this roster, and I'm sure we will learn a lot about this team in the next two games against Brazil and Colombia, which Tack and I will be, of course, covering as we usually do. So that's the roster, guys. Remember, one guy will get cut. We don't know who that's going to be. And like I said, sports is back. And like I said earlier, this could change even more. Guys could get injured, get knocks. You can still change guys between now and June 12th. June 12th is the final date. The final date for the final rosters to be submitted. That is the day of the Brazil game. Aaron Long's Big Stick says, Shaq and Tim are starters, better than Scally, W triple G. Aaron Long's Big Stick always coming in clutch with the trolling. I forgot to play the sponsor video, so let's do that now.
and improved. Underdog Fantasy Sports is back with a new and improved pick'em game across all sports that makes it easy to play fantasy sports with just a few clicks. Each sport allows you to build a parlay that includes between 2 and 5 predictions about the outcomes of player projections. As you would expect, the more picks you include, the greater the potential payout. Don't go crazy with it and play responsibly, but adding a few bucks here and there to a game gives it a little more excitement and stakes. Use my promo code 11yanks or click the link in the description to start playing, and Underdog will match whatever you put in your account up to $100. Enjoy!
All right, guys. So let's read a couple of super chats here, and then I do have to hop on a plane to come back to Los Angeles. I was shooting a movie out here. Julian Vivas, I don't get why Gregg keeps calling the MLS guys. What if Josh Sargent isn't cleared? Does that mean Jesus will be called? Well, if Josh Sargent isn't cleared, then he'll be the first guy cut, and it will go back to 26. But yeah, I mean, with Gregg, nothing would surprise me. There's a chance that, if Josh Sargent can't make it, then the next guy up is his boy Jesus, who we all know Gregg loves, even though Jesus has also been injured for multiple months and only just came back now, right? So something to consider. Ravens Medical, always doing good work with the injury updates. Injury updates, Tyler Adams is still nursing a lumbar back strain. Josh Sargent has suffered another lateral ankle sprain. MRI shows no tearing. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with Sargent, but his ankles are a problem. Remember in Qatar, it was the ankle injury that, standing on the ball that got him again, in that Iran game that got him injured. So that's what made Jesus Ferreira start against the Netherlands, right? So, man, hopefully Josh Sargent is clear to play, because I think the last thing any of us want to see is Jesus Ferreira back in the mix. Steve Galley, do you think U.S. Soccer has a requirement of Triple G to bring a certain number of MLS players to major tourneys? As dumb as it is, it wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me at all. And to be honest, Steve, I don't even think they need to have a requirement, right? You don't have to have a list saying you have to bring this amount of players. All you have to do is hire the guy who has a history of being deeply, madly, truly in love with MLS players and their incompetence. That's all you have to do. Why go hire a competent coach when you can hire the guy who thinks that MLS players are so good because they're familiar with MLS stadiums, and that is what makes them, valuable to a men's national team roster. Remember, he said that in the last cycle. What makes, what value do the MLS players have on these rosters? And he's like, well, they know the stadium, like Jesus Ferreira could tell you the fire exit in Dallas Stadium, and I think that's really a crucial thing when you have a national team. Where's the fire exit? And then Sean Johnson, well, that guy can do karaoke unlike anybody else. In fact, if he had been in that stadium, when that raccoon charged the field in an MLS stadium, Sean Johnson would have caught that raccoon long before anybody there. So he's really pest control for the team, and that's an important part of a national team program. It's just nonsensical excuses that we hear endlessly coming from the mouth of Gregg, just absolutely endlessly. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's all very wild and not totally surprising, right? Let's see what happens with the rest of this roster between now. Gregg's going to do a press conference in like 4 minutes. I'm going to watch. I can't wait to hear the level of excuses. Shaq Moore, since he's come back from injury, has been balling. And, he's one of those guys, scratch his bald head, one of those guys that, he's just consistent and a good performer and a great guy out in the dressing room. And Weston loves him. And when Weston loves someone, that's important for us and for the development of this team. All right. I think Triple G brings the MLS players on his own because Hughes, Hudson, and BJ brought all European guys. Yeah, in the Nations League, right? And the Gold Cup was different because the European guys were unavailable. But yeah, you're right. In the outside of Miles Robinson, I think Anthony Hudson still brought him. But you're right. Mostly those guys brought players who have been quality and standouts for their clubs at good levels in Europe and brought them into the national team, which is how it should be. So we'll see what happens with the rest of this. We'll see how those friendlies go. Don't be surprised to see Shaq Moore start one of those friendlies against either Colombia or Brazil in order to give him an opportunity. Don't be surprised, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see what happens with this this press conference with Gregg. I'm going to have to go apply for it quickly here, and we'll see what happens. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Copa America will be exciting regardless, and we'll cover the friendlies leading up to it. And again, I apologize for the low quality of the stream. I'm in Cancun on hotel Wi-Fi. I'm kind of rushing to get out the door to get to the airport, but thank you. Thanks for hanging. Hopefully, it's going to be a lot of fun, regardless of the very bizarre roster choices from 23 to 27. Who do you think will be cut? I think it will probably be Tim Tillman, but it also wouldn't surprise me if it was Luca Del Torre or Josh Sargent or Ricardo Pepi or someone like that. But I think the one that makes the most sense from not logically, but from Gregg's perspective, will probably be Tim Tillman. All right, guys, have a great one and enjoy the rest of your day, and talk to y'all soon.